There are films that entertain. And there are films that stay with you. Not because of their perfection, but because of the emotions they awaken. My Fault, Culpa Mía belongs to that rare second category. It's not just a teenage romance about forbidden love, it's a storm that rises quietly, then consumes everything in its path. Watching it feels like stepping into the private world of two souls. Noah and Nick. Who were never meant to meet, yet whose connection becomes inevitable, dangerous, and heartbreakingly real. From the first moment Nicole Wallace and Gabriel Guevara appear together on screen, there's a current between them, an invisible thread that tightens with every glance, every argument, every silence. The story begins with Noah, a young woman uprooted from her world when her mother remarries. She's forced to leave behind her old life, her friends, her freedom. The pieces that made her feel like herself. The mansion she moves into feels cold, elegant and suffocating. Then comes Nick, her new stepbrother, the kind of boy who seems to have the world under his control yet is burning from the inside. His presence is magnetic and unsettling. The first time their eyes meet, there's defiance, almost hostility. But underneath, something raw and unspoken stirs. The beauty of My Fault lies not just in its plot, but in the unguarded tension it sustains. Every scene between Noah and Nick breathes with contradiction, anger that hides attraction, distance that aches for closeness. Their chemistry is not loud or forced, it lives in the pauses, the sharp breaths, the lingering looks that speak what words can't. Nicole and Gabriel don't act these emotions. They embody them. You feel their confusion, their guilt, their magnetic pull towards something they know they shouldn't want. The film moves through the familiar tropes of young love. Jealousy, rebellion, danger. But what sets it apart is the emotional truth behind every choice. Noah isn't a simple girl drawn to a bad boy, she's a spirit trying to understand why the person who scares her also feels like home. Nick, on the other hand, is not just reckless, he's wounded, guarded, and terrified of feeling anything real. Their love doesn't bloom like a fairy tale, it crashes like a wave. It hurts, heals, and transforms. Visually, the film glows with a moody beauty. Golden lights against dark nights, moments of stillness surrounded by chaos. Every car race, every fight, every quiet bedroom scene reflects a deeper theme, the search for control in a world that constantly takes it away. Noah finds herself caught between reason and emotion, between what's right and what feels true. And Nick, the boy who hides pain behind arrogance, slowly reveals the soft edges he's tried to bury. Their connection becomes an act of defiance against everything around them. The supporting characters orbit their world. But it's always Noah and Nick who command the screen. When they argue, you feel the sting. When they laugh, it's fleeting and precious. When they touch, the world holds its breath. It's not about perfection. It's about honesty. The movie allows them to be messy, flawed, impulsive. And that's what makes their love believable. Because real love isn't clean, it's complicated, chaotic, and sometimes wrong. But it changes you in ways you can't undo. There's a quiet tragedy in how the story unfolds. The more Noah and Nick try to stay apart, the closer they're pulled together. Their bond becomes a mirror, reflecting not only love but also everything they fear in themselves. In Nicole Wallace's performance, there's a subtle pain in her eyes. The constant conflict between logic and longing. Gabriel Guevara brings a dangerous tenderness to Nick. A boy who wants to protect her but can't protect himself from falling. Together, they create something rare, love that feels alive, trembling, and real. What makes My Fault resonate so deeply is its emotional honesty. It doesn't shy away from showing how love can be both beautiful and destructive. It doesn't romanticize pain, but shows how two broken people might find healing in each other, even when the world says they shouldn't. The music, too, feels like an echo of their hearts. Slow beats that rise and fade. Lyrics that whisper what the characters can't say aloud. Watching it, you feel like an intruder in their world. Witnessing something private. Something you shouldn't see but can't turn away from. The camera lingers not just on faces but on emotions. A trembling hand, a nervous glance. The space between two people who want to touch but can't. It's this attention to emotional detail that makes the film so immersive. You don't just watch Noah and Nick fall in love, you feel it with them. By the end of the first act, you realize this isn't just about forbidden romance. It's about identity, vulnerability, and the way love can reveal who we truly are. The mansion becomes a symbol of control, a place where appearances matter more than truth. And yet, within those walls, two souls discover something wild and honest. It's ironic that the forbidden becomes the only thing that feels real. Nicole Wallace and Gabriel Guevara carry the entire film with their chemistry. There's a tenderness in their chaos, a poetry in their conflict. They don't need grand declarations. Sometimes just a look is enough to say everything. Their performances turn My Fault into more than a teenage drama. It becomes an emotional confession. A story of how love, even when impossible, teaches us what it means to feel alive. As the story deepens, My Fault begins to move beyond attraction and dives into the fragile territory of trust. What starts as curiosity between Noah and Nick becomes a language they can't unlearn. Every small moment. A shared glance across a crowded hallway. A teasing remark that hides something tender. Builds a rhythm that feels more like destiny than coincidence. It's in the quiet moments that their connection breathes most loudly. When Nick drives recklessly through the night, and Noah looks out the window, the wind in her hair, the music low and haunting, there's a feeling of escape neither of them can name. For a few seconds, the world disappears, and only the hum of their hearts remains. The film is brave enough to let silence speak. There are long pauses where nothing happens. No dialogue, no explanation. Just emotion hanging in the air. It's in those seconds that the audience understands everything. The fear, the desire, the impossible pull. Gabriel Guevara's eyes carry 1,000 contradictions. Defiance, regret, tenderness. Nicole Wallace answers him not with words, but with presence, with the quiet strength of someone who's learning to surrender without losing herself. Their chemistry isn't just physical, it's emotional electricity. You can almost feel the temperature shift when they share the frame. As Noah tries to adjust to her new life, she discovers Nick's world. Fast cars, underground races, friends who live on the edge. She sees the darkness he hides behind his arrogance. And that's where she begins to understand him. There's a certain tragedy in watching her fall. She knows the danger, but love makes her fearless. Each scene between them feels like a dance between light and shadow. One moment they're fighting. The next they're drawn so close that the camera almost trembles. It's intoxicating and unsettling, the kind of tension that defines great cinematic love stories. The narrative doesn't romanticize rebellion, it uses it as a mirror for youth. How we run from pain, how we disguise longing as anger. Nick's rebellion is a cry for freedom, but Noah sees beyond it. She sees the boy beneath the armor, the one who just wants to be understood. In her presence, Nick begins to soften. You watch it happen slowly, through small gestures, his voice lowering when he speaks to her, his gaze lingering a second longer than before. The transformation is subtle but powerful, and Gabriel's performance makes it believable. He doesn't play Nick as a cliché bad boy, he plays him as a human being terrified of needing someone. The emotional heartbeat of My Fault comes from that realization. Love doesn't fix you, but it exposes you. It takes off your masks. Noah and Nick spend half the film trying to resist that truth, yet every attempt at distance brings them closer. The more they fight it, the deeper they fall. There's a scene where they argue under the glow of streetlights, voices rising, eyes wet with frustration. The words don't matter as much as what lies beneath them. Fear of loss. Fear of crossing lines that can't be uncrossed. When silence finally falls, you can almost hear the sound of their hearts breaking and mending at the same time. The direction captures these emotions with an almost photographic intimacy. The camera doesn't intrude, it observes. It stays close enough to catch every flicker of vulnerability, but never judges. The cinematography wraps their world in amber light and blue shadows, as if every frame is painted with memory. The soundtrack weaves through it like a heartbeat. slow, rhythmic, aching. Each song feels like a confession, an echo of what neither of them dares to say aloud. What keeps the film grounded is Noah's growth. Nicole Wallace gives her a realism that's refreshing in a story so charged with fantasy. She's strong, but she's not invincible. She feels deeply, but she learns to draw lines. Her performance is a portrait of quiet evolution. In her, you see the conflict of a girl who wants to belong yet refuses to lose herself in someone else's chaos. That's where the film finds its soul. Inside her decision to love not blindly, but bravely. As the relationship unfolds, the world around them begins to crack. Nick's past creeps into the story. Enemies, mistakes, debts that refuse to stay buried. The romance becomes entangled with danger, and the stakes rise. Yet even in those tense sequences, the emotional center remains intact. When violence threatens their fragile bond, it's their feelings that carry the suspense, not the action. Every risk Nick takes feels personal, driven by guilt and love rather than pride. It's in those moments that we see the full complexity of his character. A young man trying to rewrite the story of his own heart. What's remarkable about My Fault is how it balances intensity with vulnerability. The film could have easily drowned in melodrama, but it never does. It understands that love stories are most powerful when they're grounded in truth. Even when the plot turns wild, the emotions remain sincere. That sincerity is what makes the audience forgive the chaos. Because in the end, My Fault isn't about perfection. It's about the beautiful mess that happens when two people choose to see each other completely. The emotional crescendo of this part of the story hits when Noah and Nick finally stop pretending. There's no speech, no declaration. Just a moment of surrender. The world fades. The camera lingers, and their connection becomes undeniable. It's not a celebration, it's an admission. They know the world will never understand, but for a heartbeat, they don't care. In that silence, the film captures something pure, love stripped of reason, fragile but infinite. As the lights of the city flicker outside their window, you realize that My Fault isn't asking you to approve of their love. It's asking you to feel it. To remember what it's like to want something so fiercely it scares you. To understand that some connections are too powerful to fit inside rules. And that's what makes the film unforgettable. It speaks the language of emotion more fluently than logic ever could. By the time the second act closes, Noah and Nick's story feels less like fiction and more like confession. Their love is no longer just forbidden. It's transformative. They've crossed the line, and nothing will ever be the same again. And yet, somehow, you can't wish it away. Because beneath the mistakes and the danger, there's something honest. Something human, something painfully real. By the time the story reaches its middle arc, My Fault becomes less about what's forbidden, and more about what's inevitable. Noah and Nick are no longer just two people drawn together by chance. They're reflections of one another, pieces of the same wound trying to find healing. There's something magnetic about watching two souls fight the current of their own emotions, trying to build walls that crumble every time they look at each other. Their story begins to resemble a heartbeat, uneven, wild, unstoppable. Every choice they make feels like walking on glass, beautiful and dangerous at once. When they share a moment of peace, the audience almost doesn't trust it. Because this kind of love is never calm for long. There's always something unsaid, a shadow following every smile. The film captures this rhythm beautifully. You start to realize that My Fault is not telling a simple love story, it's telling the story of growing up too fast, of learning that love is not just comfort but consequence. Nicole Wallace carries this evolution with grace. Her Noah is no longer the uncertain girl who arrived in a strange house. She's changing, quietly, learning how to breathe in a world that keeps trying to control her. Her love for Nick doesn't make her weaker. It exposes her strength. Every time she chooses to stay, she isn't surrendering. She's deciding what kind of person she wants to be. And that's the emotional brilliance of the movie. It lets love be messy but meaningful. Gabriel Guevara, on the other hand, turns Nick into a storm that slowly learns to rest. His performance balances danger and tenderness so perfectly that you can't tell where one ends and the other begins. When he looks at Noah, there's a softness that breaks through all his anger. It's in the way he protects her, without realizing she's protecting him too. The chemistry between them becomes its own character. Invisible but alive in every frame. You don't just see them fall in love, you feel the gravity of it. The tension escalates as Nick's past begins to close in. Old enemies resurface, dangerous debts come calling, and Noah's life is pulled into his chaos. Yet instead of turning the film into a thriller, these elements amplify the emotional stakes. Every fight, every chase, every night spent hiding is soaked in emotion. The danger becomes symbolic. It's the embodiment of their fears, their guilt, and their need to fight for what feels real. The more danger surrounds them, the more they cling to each other, as if love itself is the only safe place left. One of the film's quiet triumphs is how it treats passion not as glamour, but as confession. The moments of closeness between Noah and Nick are not just romantic scenes. They are emotional dialogues. Every touch is layered with meaning, every whisper holds unspoken promises. It's not lust that drives them, it's the desperate need to feel understood. When they hold each other, you sense years of loneliness dissolving. It's raw, unfiltered, and hauntingly beautiful. The camera moves like a memory in these scenes, slow and tender, as if afraid to disturb what's real. The lighting softens, the music fades, and the world outside disappears. These are the kind of moments that make My Fault feel timeless. It doesn't rely on spectacle, but on stillness. It's a film that understands that true intimacy doesn't need to be loud. It needs to be honest. But honesty comes with its own cost. As their relationship deepens, guilt begins to shadow their love. Noah starts to question whether love can justify breaking the rules that define their family. Nick, meanwhile, battles his own demons. The fear of losing her, the guilt of knowing how fragile their world is. There's a moment where he pulls away, trying to protect her by pretending he doesn't care. It's heartbreaking, not because of what's said, but because of what's not. His silence screams louder than his words, and yet, even in heartbreak, the film refuses to turn cynical. It believes in the beauty of trying, of loving even when you know it might destroy you. When Noah cries, it's not the helpless cry of a victim. It's the cry of someone who's realizing how deeply she can feel. There's maturity in her pain, a kind of awakening. She begins to see love not as escape, but as confrontation. The moment you face yourself in another person's eyes, and have to decide who you are. Gabriel and Nicole's performances evolve together in these scenes like music. He is the storm, she is the calm that learns to move with it. Their emotional timing is flawless. When one breaks, the other bends. When one hides, the other reaches out. It's the delicate balance of two people learning to breathe the same air. By this point, the audience has stopped judging them. The taboo no longer matters. What matters is the truth between them. The film's emotional design becomes clear here. It's not about moral correctness, but about emotional honesty. Love, in My Fault, is not presented as something clean or idealized. It's portrayed as something that demands courage. The courage to feel deeply, to face consequences, to forgive, to change. Every tear, every bruise, every mistake becomes part of that journey. The cinematography continues to mirror their emotions. As their relationship darkens, so does the palette. The nights grow deeper, the shadows heavier. But when they find brief moments of peace, laughter in the car, sunlight on their faces, the colors bloom again. It's as if the film itself is breathing with them, alive to their every emotion. The music swells in perfect harmony. Modern, melancholic, and intoxicating. It's less soundtrack and more heartbeat. What makes My Fault unforgettable at this point is how it transforms youthful recklessness into emotional depth. It starts as a story about rebellion and becomes a story about redemption. It's not about two people defying the world. It's about two people trying to forgive themselves enough to love fully. That's what gives the film its haunting power. By the end of this middle section, you realize that the true fault is not falling in love. It's pretending not to. Noah and Nick's love isn't perfect, but it's real. It's the kind of love that leaves scars and yet makes you grateful for the wound. And that's what the title My Fault really means. Not guilt, but ownership. It's the moment you say, yes, this was my mistake, my risk, my love. And I would choose it again. As the story moves toward its final act, everything that once felt like passion begins to feel like destiny, heavy and irreversible. The world Noah and Nick built in secret starts to tremble under the weight of reality. Love that once felt like freedom now carries the sharp edges of truth. Their connection, born in defiance, now stands on the edge of destruction. Every choice they've made, every risk they've taken, begins to echo back at them, demanding a price. There's a shift in the air. A quiet foreboding. The camera slows down, the colors deepen, and the world around them grows still. Noah senses it first. That something is coming, something they can't outrun. Yet even as fear creeps in, she can't turn away. Because to walk away from Nick would be like walking away from her own heartbeat. Love, once sweet and intoxicating, becomes an H that burns quietly in every breath. Nick is unraveling, torn between his love for Noah and the chaos of his past. The ghosts he tried to bury begin to claw their way back into his life. Old enemies resurface, violence lurks around the edges, and the fragile peace he built with Noah begins to crack. Gabriel Guevara plays these moments with devastating honesty. His confidence fades, replaced by desperation. The boy who once seemed untouchable now looks haunted, carrying the weight of everything he's done. Yet, even broken, his love for Noah never wavers. It's in the way he looks at her, even when words fail him. It's in the trembling of his voice when he says her name. Nicole Wallace meets his energy with quiet strength. Noah refuses to abandon him, even when it hurts, even when she knows that loving him means bleeding. Her courage isn't loud. It's steady, graceful, unyielding. There's a scene where she sits alone, tears slipping silently down her face, her reflection fractured in a mirror. It's not just sadness, it's transformation. The girl who once resisted the world's control now learns to stand firm, not for rebellion, but for love. The tension builds toward confrontation. Nick's past, the fights, the grudges, the mistakes, explodes into the present. The film doesn't hide from the darkness. It shows how easily love can be tested when life turns cruel. There's violence, there's danger, but through it all, the emotional thread never snaps. Noah becomes his anchor, his reason to fight. And Nick, despite his chaos, becomes her mirror. The person who forces her to see her own strength. When they finally face the breaking point, the film gives them a moment of unbearable beauty, the kind of scene that silences everything else. No music, no noise, just two people staring at each other as if time has stopped. Their world is falling apart, but in that silence, they find peace. It's not about holding on anymore, it's about understanding. They've hurt each other, saved each other, lost each other, and found something unspoken in the middle of it all. Forgiveness. My Fault captures this moment with poetic precision. The lighting softens, the air seems to thicken, and every detail feels alive. You can see every emotion flicker across their faces. Regret, longing, love, fear. It's like watching two people standing in the ruins of everything they've built, realizing that the ruin itself is beautiful, because it means they truly lived. The love they shared may be complicated, but it was real. Painfully, deeply, dangerously real. The film doesn't give them easy resolutions. It doesn't paint their love as perfect or promise a fairy tale ending. Instead, it gives them something far more human. Growth. Both Noah and Nick come to understand that love isn't possession, it's permission. Permission to change, to heal, to move forward even when it hurts. That's the brilliance of the story. It refuses to make love the solution to everything, yet it shows how love can be the reason to become better. In these final scenes, the direction becomes softer, slower, more reflective. The camera lingers on hands almost touching, on breaths shared but never caught, on eyes heavy with emotion. You can feel that the film is saying goodbye, not just to the story, but to the version of Noah and Nick that began it. They are no longer the same. Love has changed them. Carved new paths through their hearts. Nicole and Gabriel's performances reach their peak here. There's a maturity in their expressions, a quiet knowing in their eyes. They don't need dramatic dialogue. Their silence speaks more than words ever could. You can tell they understood the emotional gravity of these roles. The fine line between love and pain, guilt and forgiveness, fault and fate. Their connection remains electric, even in heartbreak. You feel their souls reaching for each other, even as life pulls them apart. The film's emotional crescendo comes not with a scream, but with a sigh. When everything finally collapses, the lies, the danger, the pretense, there's a strange peace that settles over them. It's as if love itself exhales. They stand, bruised but breathing, broken but alive. You realize that the story was never about perfection. It was about survival. About finding beauty in the fault lines. And that's what My Fault ultimately teaches. That love is not meant to be safe. It's meant to challenge, to change, to burn. The title isn't an apology, it's an acceptance. My Fault becomes a confession of life. Of owning your choices, your mistakes, your feelings. Noah and Nick's love may have begun in defiance, but it ends in understanding. They learn that sometimes, love doesn't need to last forever to be real. Sometimes, it's enough that it existed. Fierce, flawed, unforgettable. The closing moments leave a mark that lingers long after the credits. The music swells one last time. Gentle, melancholic, like a memory fading into dusk. Noah's gaze holds both pain and peace. Nick looks at her as though she's both his sin and salvation. And as they part, you feel that the universe has taken something from them, and given them something greater. Truth. The truth that love, even when it breaks you, still makes you whole. The film ends not with closure, but with continuation. The sense that their story isn't over, only paused. And in that space between endings and beginnings, My Fault becomes more than a movie. It becomes an experience. An echo of every forbidden feeling, every late night memory, every heartbeat that once belonged to someone else. When the screen finally fades to black, something inside you doesn't. The story lingers like a perfume left in the air, impossible to forget. My Fault is one of those films that doesn't end when the credits roll. It stays in the bloodstream, whispering softly about what love really costs. It asks quiet questions that follow you long after. How much of yourself are you willing to give for someone who understands your chaos? How do you forgive the parts of love that hurt you the most? In the stillness after the ending, Noah and Nick remain alive in memory. You can see them somewhere, perhaps driving down an empty road, music low, the world outside blurring past. They don't need to speak. Their story has already said everything about how first love feels wild, urgent, terrifying, and unforgettable. It isn't perfect, but it is true, and that truth is what makes it beautiful. The brilliance of My Fault lies in its emotional honesty. It never hides behind cliché or formula. Instead, it lets the characters bleed, make mistakes, and learn. It treats love not as an escape, but as a mirror that reveals who you really are when the world stops watching. The fault isn't simply falling in love. The fault is believing that you can live untouched by it. The film understands that some loves are not meant to be forever. They are meant to wake you up, to teach you, to mark you. Nicole Wallace delivers one of her most mature performances. Her Noah evolves from a guarded girl into a woman who knows the price of her heart. You watch her rediscover herself through the fire of emotion, realizing that strength isn't about not falling. It's about standing up afterward. Every flicker in her eyes carries both innocence and knowledge, a mixture of fear and quiet pride. When she finally walks away from the mansion, or perhaps from the version of herself that once lived there, you sense that she's walking into her own story. Gabriel Guevara's Nick is all contradiction. Tough yet tender. Reckless yet yearning for peace. He embodies the H of someone who's never been truly seen until now. There's a haunting gentleness in the way he softens around Noah. Like a storm learning to love the rain. Gabriel's performance gives the film its heartbeat. He doesn't try to make Nick flawless, he makes him human. When he smiles for the first time without hiding behind arrogance, it feels like sunlight after months of gray. Together, Nicole and Gabriel create a chemistry that feels almost too real. It's not the exaggerated passion of fantasy, but the trembling, imperfect truth of connection. Every look, every hesitation, every breath shared between them becomes a sentence in an unspoken poem. They prove that love stories don't need elaborate plots or endless dialogue, they just need honesty. Watching them feels like watching emotion itself take form. The direction by Domingo Gonza, Les deserves quiet admiration. He frames the film with intimacy, letting the audience sit close enough to feel the characters breathing. The choice to keep the visuals warm yet shadowed gives the story an emotional texture, like golden light leaking through cracks in darkness. The camera becomes another character, sometimes observing tenderly, sometimes trembling with tension. The pacing allows emotions to bloom slowly, almost painfully, until they fill the entire frame. What elevates My Fault beyond its surface story is its understanding of consequence. It doesn't glamorize rebellion or forbidden romance, it exposes the fragility beneath them. Love is shown as a force that builds and destroys at the same time. When Noah and Nick break, they do so completely. But in breaking, they discover what truly matters. The narrative reminds us that love's real power isn't in possession, but in recognition, seeing another soul and saying, "I know you." The music completes that vision. Each track feels chosen not for rhythm, but for emotion. Slow beats that echo like heartbeats, lyrics that blend into the characters' thoughts. The soundtrack becomes memory itself. The kind you hear long after you've turned everything off. It carries you through the highs and lows, through moments of silence and storm, until you feel as though the film has synced with your pulse. When you look at My Fault as a whole, it feels like more than a story. It feels like a confession. Every frame, every line, every hesitation says, this is what it's like to love when you're not supposed to. It's about learning that love doesn't ask permission. It simply happens. And once it does, you're never the same. The movie doesn't punish its characters for feeling, it lets them live through the consequences and find meaning within them. There's something timeless about how it ends. It doesn't tie every thread neatly, it leaves space for hope, for reflection, for continuation. You can imagine Noah and Nick years later, older, calmer, still carrying each other somewhere deep inside. Perhaps they meet again, perhaps they don't, but the memory of what they shared remains unbroken, like a scar that no longer hurts, but still glows faintly in the dark. That's the true legacy of My Fault. Not tragedy, but transformation. As a film, it achieves something rare. It feels alive. You can sense the warmth of youth, the ache of mistakes, the electricity of emotion. It reminds you of the first time you felt something so intense it scared you. It shows how love can be both wound and medicine. It's a story about growing through pain, about finding yourself in someone else's eyes, about realizing that sometimes the person who changes you isn't meant to stay forever. And that's okay. The cultural impact of My Fault comes from this emotional honesty. Viewers around the world saw themselves in Noah and Nick. Not in the details, but in the feeling of loving someone you shouldn't, of wanting something you can't explain. Nicole and Gabriel turned that emotion into art. Their chemistry didn't just light up the screen, it started conversations about vulnerability, healing, and the messy beauty of being human. In the end, My Fault is not simply a story of forbidden love. It's a meditation on choice, consequence, and courage. It's about the way love strips us bare, forces us to confront who we are, and dares us to forgive ourselves. The movie doesn't preach, it feels. It invites you to remember your own fault, your own heartbreak, your own moment when you stood on the edge between right and real, and chose the latter. When the final notes fade and the credits roll, you're left not with sadness, but with a strange, peaceful ache. The kind that comes after truth. You understand now that fault isn't a stain, it's a signature. It means you lived, you risked, you felt, and in that realization, My Fault transcends its genre. It becomes a love letter to imperfection. To the way two souls can collide, break, and still light up the dark. That's why this film matters. Because somewhere inside its story, every viewer finds a reflection of their own. A secret love. A quiet regret. A fault they wouldn't trade for anything. And as the image of Noah and Nick fades into memory, two silhouettes against the dimming light, you understand that their story was never just theirs. It was everyone's.